I'll be talking about phonological processes in Korean, Japanese, and Chinese when they speak English. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about therapy techniques that we typically use. Next, please. Let me start out my talk with this burning question. Can you listen to it? Can you listen to it again? See, I'm mimicking this British accent now. Have you thought about the reason why these echoic words, onomatopoeia, it always intrigues me why a physiological phenomenon is the same. The sound has a certain frequency, certain intensity, and certain quality. But we hear all the same sound, but we express it differently. So, like I said yesterday in my talk, can you go to the next slide? Korean pig goes 꿀꿀. Japanese pig, boo boo. Chinese pig, 쿨쿨. American pig, oink oink. 꿀꿀, boo boo. 쿨쿨, oink oink. And what about dog? Korean dog, mung mung. Japanese dog, wang wang. Chinese dog, very similar, wang wang. American dog, bow wow, or woof woof. Mung mung, wang wang, wang wang, woof woof. See? Thank you. Why would that happen? My assumption is that if you have more phonemes and vowels in your native language, probably you can describe the sound more delicately and more closely, more closer to the actual animal sound. That's my assumption, but I don't know. This is one of my research interests that I like to pursue. The number of phonemes in each language and the distance or difference between the actual sound and the echoic words. Next slide, please. Now, let me talk about phonological processes. Even in normal kids, they go through the developmental stages where they just cannot simply pronounce the phonemes correctly. For example, 2 or 3-year toddlers in the United States, they go thun for sun, and they usually go wed for red. So the processes of stopping and fronting are there. Fricatives are more difficult to produce for little kids, and some phonemes are just phonotactically difficult to produce, such as R. Those patterns exist in ESL speakers as well. So in the field of speech-language pathology, phonological process is defined as rules that account for errors of distortion, substitution, omission, and addition. I know Japanese show a lot of U and O addition. I know most Japanese say kimuchi for kimchi. That's U addition, right? I know that much. Can we go to the next slide? Little that I know about Japanese for this particular presentation, I wanted to collect some helpful information for Japanese attendees. So I asked one Japanese come to my office and produce King Kong. And it was very interesting to me. She went, Kingo Kongo. Oh, there's another U addition. So right then, I corrected her pronunciation right there. But let me get back to it afterwards if I have time left later on. And next, I asked her produce Hong Kong. And as a speech language pathologist, I thought she would say Hongu Kongu. See, Kingu Kongu for King Kong. So Hongu Kongu for Hong Kong. Wouldn't it be logical that way? But she went Hong Kong. So those things are phonological. I mean, the vowel processes, to be more specific. Can we go to... Now let's talk about vowel processes versus consonant processes. With speech language pathologists, we usually deal with consonants. But to me, vowels are more basic and more difficult to teach. So I ran a study a couple of years ago and made a list of vowel processes in Korean ESL speakers. 33 Korean undergraduate and graduate Korean students participated in this study. Next, please. Can you skip this page and get back to you later on? Okay. No, next. Next. All right. I used 45 test words. I had them enunciate each and every word. Ki, ni, no problem. Lip, pig. Dr. Lee already talked about this. We have such a big problem here. Most Koreans produced tense vowel E, so they went leap, pig, or something like that. Ki, day, no problem. Number 7, bed, net. This is something a bit different from what Dr. Hyunbok Lee told us, but there might be some reason for this. The younger generation of the subjects who participated in my study, they were college kids, and they tended to say bad for bed, and they tended to say net for net. So, so much for that. Number 9, cat, fan, boot, two. We all did all right, but number 13, foot, cookie. Yes, many Koreans have problems with this vowel. We usually say foot cookie, rather than foot cookie. Bow, toe, no problem. 17, saw, ball. We have such a big problem here. The majority of Koreans would go so, 볼, something like that. Cup, no problem. Number 20, father. Here we drop all the rhotic components. So we go father. Next, please. Number 21, thumb was produced thumb. Cup, soda, potato, not much difficulty, but number 25, bird, girl, anchor, mother. Again, we dropped the rhotic component and said bird, girl, anchor, mother, something like that. Cow, ice, eye, boy, toy, no problem. Number 35, deer, ear, car, jar, fork, hair, chair. Here again, we deroticize all the words. And 43, monkey, canoe, baby, no serious problem, although canoe was pronounced kanu. The primary stress was on the wrong position. Can we go back to the previous 2 페이지 앞으로? So I concluded that many Koreans raise and tense the lex vowel and reduce rhotic diphthongs. Let's see the first one first. Actually, Dr. Lee already talked about it, but let me just echo on it. We can't really hear the difference between still, heat, hit, ill, sheet, sorry. And second one, we have problems with R sound, and I found that even though I just looked at the vowel, running this study, I found that the most difficult consonant cluster for Korean is R and L blend. We have difficulty differentiating these two phonemes to begin with, and one is followed by or preceded by one another. We are in hot water. So girl, like bird, girl, world, those words. Third, foot, cookie, wood, we can't really get them right. Finally, I told you this is a little bit different result than what Dr. Lee told us. But I suppose the subjects who were in my study were very young, so there might have been some changes in Korean phonetic system nowadays. Next, please. So I made a list of name of the vowel processes and definitions of them, like the following, for teaching purposes. Vowel backing. A vowel is replaced with a vowel made with a more posterior tongue placement. Vowel lowering. A vowel is replaced with a vowel made with a lower tongue placement. Next, please. Vowel raising. A vowel is replaced with a vowel made with a higher tongue position. Centralization. A vowel is replaced with a more centralized vowel. Vowel unrounding. A normally rounded vowel is placed with an unrounded vowel. Vowel fronting. A vowel is replaced with a vowel made with a more anterior tongue placement. Next, please. Vowel laxing. A tense vowel is replaced with a lax vowel, and two processes regarding diphthongs and complete vowel harmony. One vowel is changed so that two vowels in a word are the same. Next, please. Tense harmony. A lax vowel becomes tense in the presence of another tense vowel. Finally, height vowel harmony. A lax vowel is replaced by a vowel that is closer to the height of another vowel in the same word. Next, please. Now, let me talk about a study that I've done more recently about consonant processes. 12 Koreans, 15 Japanese, and 8 Chinese participated in my study, and picture articulation test was administered. 2 certified speech-language pathologists graded the subject's misarticulation independently, and their inter-grader reliability was 93%. Next, please. Well, there were so many processes, so I would just mention the most frequently occurring patterns to be more focused. See, in Korean, I hope the audience back there can read the first one. In Korean, stopping was the most prominent error, followed by backing. 42% and 17% respectively. Sorry, I don't have the laser pointer, but look at the first and second column. Next, please. Exactly the same pattern was observed in Japanese. So stopping was the most frequently occurring error, followed by backing. 25% and 16% for each. Next, please. But in Chinese speakers, continuancy addition was the most prevalent error, and it happened 15% of the time. It was interesting, quite dissimilar. Next, please. So I made several figures to make the comparisons more understandable. I categorized the errors into 3 groups. First, let us look at the position change. Let's look at the second one from the left, backing. Koreans and, no, look, go to the figure. 그림으로 가주세요. Okay. Koreans and Japanese showed relatively more errors compared to Chinese. I'm talking about the second one from the left here. See, backing error. Koreans and Japanese have relatively more errors compared to Chinese. But then again, depalatalization only occurred in Chinese. Well, Koreans and Japanese didn't show any. Well, actually, Japanese did show a little bit, but it was negligible. So in terms of position change, there were those similarities and dissimilarities. Next, please. What about manner changes? Stopping was very popular in both Japanese and Korean. Look at the first column. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but let me move around. See here, In terms of manner change, stopping was very popular in Korean and Japanese, not Chinese. But here, interestingly enough, continuancy addition, Japanese and Koreans do not show any. The Chinese, the only one who made that processes. Next, please. Finally, let's look at voicing change. Here's another interesting figure. See, Chinese showed significantly more errors in voicing. The post-vocalic devoicing was manifested by all three groups of people, but the percentage of it was a little bit different. Japanese did the post-vocalic devoicing the most, and the other two processes, Japanese and Koreans, did not show any. Next, please. So I concluded that, firstly, a number of similar patterns were exhibited in Koreans and Japanese, but not in Chinese speakers. Secondly, although a number of similar simplification patterns were observed, the sounds that substituted for the target phonemes varied. Next, please. In terms of place change, backing was the most common pattern in Japanese and in Koreans. And let us look into further now how that happened. In Japanese, it was also interesting to me. F became H. So, for example, Japanese said hoku for fork. It was something really interesting to me. The distance between F and H are farthest, almost. While labiodental became glottal sound. See, Koreans would have said poku, pu. So the distance between F and P is quite closer. So it would have been a little bit more efficient. Well, then again, I'm Korean, that's why I think of it that way. Secondly, in Chinese, zipper, they go zipper. But in Koreans, zipper became jipper. Next, please. In terms of manner change, stopping was the most common pattern, especially in Koreans and Japanese. We all had problems with the. I investigated a target phoneme in 3 different positions, like this, feathers, bathe. And in Japanese, it was also interesting to me, very interesting. The became je, especially in the medial position. So feathers became feathers, or something like that, something similar. But in Chinese, the became g. So they went beggars. And finally, in Koreans, the became the. So we went feathers, 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 beggars, feathers, feathers, Vegas, feathers. Interesting. Next, please. Oh, can we skip that? Next. Now, let me go through real quick about voicing. The most predominant voice error pattern was the voicing of final Z, as in scissors. In English, the difference among b, p, d, t, g, k is voicing. Voicing, voiced or voiceless. But in Asian languages, it's aspiration that makes those two phonemes different. That might be why we have problems with voicing. Next, please. I would like to make 3 comments in this section. Firstly, the diversity and the amount of errors in ESL speakers are related to phonemic diversity of their native languages. Secondly, learning a second language sound is easier when the second language sound system is similar to that of their mother tongue. Very logical result, I would say. And finally, the ESL teaching methodologies in Asian countries where functional listening and speaking experiences are limited may have to be very, very carefully considered. See, this is actually what happened to one English teacher at an elementary school in Korea. This lady was teaching the word model. And she asked her student to listen to her very carefully and repeat after her. And she went, model. And one of her students, elementary school kid, raised her hand and said, hey teacher, that's not right. It's not model, it's model. See, nowadays, younger generation, they have ample opportunity to go abroad for study, for example, and for traveling purposes, for example. So it's not very uncommon to observe the students sometimes have better pronunciation. So I urge speech-language pathologists and English teachers to practice. You have to put it into practice, really. Otherwise, you'll get embarrassed sometime. Can we go to next? Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about some therapy technique that we typically use. First, auditory bombardment. Well, auditory bombardment is listening to a numerous repetition of words containing a target sound. Well, typically 2 minutes of auditory bombardment is provided at the beginning of the therapy and at the end of the therapy. And the child doesn't have to repeat the word, but just listen to it attentively while he was playing a quiet hand activity, drawing, for example. And the words cannot be, don't have to be repeated. So let me give you an example. I have a kid who has problems with R. So I would like to give him another auditory bombardment. Then the kid is put on headphone at the beginning of the therapy for 2 minutes. And the kid listened to the words which contain R sound in every position. So read, rod, rye, rotten, rodic, higher, lyric, whatnot. So he listened to it over and over and over again. For whatever reason, it produces awareness, which was not achieved through regular listening, nor by other methods. So I guess while they are engaged in certain activity, and he's listening to these words containing the target sound, I don't know, when you ask a kid, do this, do that, do the, and rebellious kids don't want to do it. So just put on headphones and let them listen to those words over and over again. Just naturally, I guess they get into their phonetic system somehow. That's auditory bombardment. And secondly, let me talk about phonetic context control. The first one is minimal pair approach. I think you've done a lot of practice on this at Dr. Ho-Young Lee's workshop yesterday. Read, lead, lead, read. What did you hear? That sort of practice. Seal, zeal. What did you hear? So sometimes it's very effective, but you have to be careful. When the kids have serious problems with pronunciation, you have to approach the opposite way. Do not compare two words which are really similar. See, that's what is called maximal opposition therapy. But they are very different. But is voiced, is voiceless. One is bilabial, there's glottal. One is stopping, the other is fricative. In every aspect of those phonemes have to be different. Then the differentiation becomes easier for kids. Lastly, I'd like to speak about deep test. Let's say the kid has problems with S sound, sun, sun. Maybe he or she would go thun. Then I urge speech language pathologists to look for facilitatory context. So put a variety of phonemes right before sound. The kid might go cup thun, cat thun, knife thun. But when it comes to kiss, he might go kiss son. Then bingo, you have to use that word right before the target sound. Sometimes this co-articulation context is facilitatory. Can I go to next? Next one that I like to speak about is the stimulability testing. Stimulability is a degree to which a misarticulation can be produced correctly by imitation. So if a child has mispronounced certain words in spontaneous speech, but when you ask him, listen and watch very carefully what you do and repeat after you, then he got it right, then the kid is stimulable. Here you have to do a lot of imitation practice. Of course, here you have to provide a good model. The next strategy that I'd like to speak about is verbal instruction and physical guidance and kinesthetic. I guess Dr. Hyunbok Lee showed a good example of these physical guidance and verbal instruction. Actually, in the therapy session, I'll wear rubber gloves, clean one at that, and actually go into the kid's mouth and touch the alveolar ridge and give them verbal instruction very specifically. Put your tongue tip right here, and I give them tactile stimulation. Those strategies can be used for little kids very effectively. Next one that I'd like to speak about is muscle training using feedback devices. I guess many of you are familiar with the Politometer and Spectrogram, so let me briefly just introduce what it is. Politometer is like a denture, artificial denture. It has a connection to the computer program and hardware, and the upper denture contains over 150 electrodes. So actually the kid is wearing not denture, but a bridge rather, where this bridge, which has 150 electrodes, and it was connected to the computer, and he produced the sound t, t, and on the computer screen, it will show exactly the placement of the tongue. And on the other side of the computer screen, it shows the model picture. So even though their auditory perception is not that great, they can follow the visual feedback. That's Politometer. Secondly, spectrogram. I showed a lot of it yesterday in my workshop lecture. It shows fundamental frequency of your voice and the distance between the formants. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of fundamental frequency. Usually normal male adults, their fundamental frequency is around 125 hertz, whereas females' fundamental frequency is like 220 hertz. What it means is that your vocal folds are thicker and longer for men compared to women. That's why men has deeper voice. So let me just listen to one lady and one gentleman. Could you please sustain ah for me? Oh. Ah. Okay, very nice. This lady and gentleman have very standard fundamental frequency, like 230 maybe hertz, and probably you have a deeper voice, so it'll range from like 115 to 120. So the lower the frequency, fundamental frequency, the deeper your voice would be. And spectrogram shows that. The third feedback device is the next. See, this is CPAP. CPAP device that probably most of you are not familiar with it. CPAP stands for continuous pressure. See, my mind goes blank. I always use it, but I forgot what the abbreviation means. Continuous pressure. CPAP, I always say CPAP. Okay, let me talk about the concept of it, how it works. The CPAP produces air pressure, airflow, and it goes through your nose. It's a device that usually used in sleeping disorder clinic. Some of you have sleeping apnea, no? See, when people have sleep apnea during the night, they will maybe snore, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, some people, die. So they develop a device called CPAP, and it produced a fairly strong airflow going through to your nose. So when you are lying down in your supine position, your soft palate and uvula drops down. So it sort of interferes your airway. So we use it for people who have hypernasality, cleft palate patients maybe, and a lot of older generation have a stroke or TBI, traumatic brain injury from car accident maybe, then their speech gets so hypernasal. And we put it on and then have produced certain sounds. And the CPAP continuously lower the soft palate, and you have to work against that. So it's a muscle training device. Next, please. This is another device that I use for hypernasal patients. Nasometer. It measures the airflow coming through your nose and coming through your mouth, and show on the computer screen how hypernasal you are or how denasal you are. So it's a good visual feedback device. Next, please. See, I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to wrap it fairly quick. See, before I came here, I sent out 2 doctoral students of mine to sample minor birds' sound. I'm the one sitting in the clinic, always teaching students or patients how to say things correctly, over and over and over again for like 6 months, over a year. But within a day, 2 minor birds were just mimic, astonishingly similar to this female doctoral students and male doctors. And I'm sitting here, what am I doing? See, let's listen to it first. The first one, please. That's a minor birds saying, how are you? Let's listen to it again. 안녕하세요. It has a good intonation as well. Second one, please. It's a song. That's, if the trainer is female, the minor bird mimics that voice. right away, within a day. And the trainer is a male, then it mimics the male voice, not to mention articulation. Can we listen to it again? And the third one is dozo, help yourself. Okay, the next one is hello, moshi moshi. And the last one, I purposely asked them to sample, teach the minor birds that sentence. It says, 손님 너무 싫어. Visitors, I hate you. Because all the visitors at the zoo come to minor birds and parrots and say things over and over again. So I kind of fell for minor birds and parrots. So I purposely taught them, you visitors, I hate you. Can we listen to this? Okay, these are minor birds. Next, please. Okay, so I wanted to comfort myself for a little bit. Perceptually, it's excellent. Excellent. Within a day, I was just astonished. So I did some analysis using instrument on 안녕하세요. This minor bird 1, minor bird 2, there's some, it has more inflection. Not exactly the same as adult men's voice, 안녕하세요. So it was very intriguing, intellectually stimulating. This minor birds, do not have vocal folds. It's only beak and the tongue. Can we go to the next? Well, I'll have to skip that. I'm running out of my time. 皆さん、ありがとうございます. Thank you for your listening.